Are we all seeing?
Yes.
All right. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get kicked off. So welcome. Thank you guys for joining us today. We're glad to have you all here with us. If you're new to the collaborative, it was started in 2023, and the idea is to help local governments understand and implement federal funding opportunities for electric transportation. Now, obviously, federal funding has shifted, but the economic, health, and environmental imperatives to continue electrifying our transportation systems remained. And so does our commitment to creating a learning community. So the collaborative is facilitated by the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy and the Southeast Sustainability Directors Network. Again, if you're new, the collaborative convenes both virtual and in-person events, and it assists local governments by connecting them to programs and partnership opportunities. It helps to build capacity and capabilities to influence state and utility funding priorities and integrate equitable guidelines into projects. And it also provides vetted resources and peer-to-peer sharing on successful strategies and lessons learned to overcome transportation electrification barriers. The collaborative is free to join. It's open to all local government representatives from Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. And we welcome staff from across municipal departments. So if you've got sustainability folks or fleet or planning or finance staff, as well as city managers and elected officials and anybody else that's relevant to the conversation, they are welcome to join. So with today's agenda, we are going to do some introductions, save the date, a quick resource review, and then we're going to have a conversation on some federal funding updates, a conversation about who's applied for funding or technical assistance, and then we're going to get into the meat and potatoes, which is EV charging fee infrastructure conversation, and a conversation on EV infrastructure assessment and financing. And then we will go over some updates on the toolkit and the transportation electrification report, and then wrap it all up with some save the dates. So make sure that everybody knows what's coming next. So with that, I'm going to kick it off. Actually, let me run through really quick. We did have a in-person meeting in Charleston with our South Carolina folks. So this year we're breaking it up. Instead of having that one big meeting in the Southeast, we're going to have state meetings. So we have one coming up in Athens, Georgia on October 14th. So all of the folks that are on the call from Georgia or Tennessee, please use the link there to register. I'll also add it to the chat. And then we also have some virtual meetings. We've kind of mapped them out. So if you could go ahead and mark off your calendars, we've got one coming up on November 13th, and then January 29th and March 12th for the remainder of the year. And then we're also starting to plan an in-person event likely in February in Florida, and then likely one in March for North Carolina. So those are all kind of upcoming things. And then I'm going to hand it over to Stacy.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I had the trouble unmuting. My name is Stacy Washington. I work with Dory at STACE, and I'll go over this slide of resources and information. First, you have an image of our website. I'll put a link in the chat for that up here after I finish speaking. This website has a lot of great information, resources, and a toolkit, as well as webinar and meeting recordings. So please make sure you check out the website if you ever have any questions or want any resources. Also, we're proud to say that we have 91 local governments that have participated in this collaborative across the Southeast. We also welcome new members. So if you are new to this collaborative, we will add you to the directory. If you do not want to be included in that directory, please let us know and we will make sure you're not included. The second image is a QR code. This is a list of resources that are on our resources page of the website. This is a resource guide that has all the resources that we've discussed in the collaborative. So if you have missed the collaborative in the past, there's a great list of plenty of resources there that you can reference. And also my favorite, because I work in the utility reform group, the last image is a utility guide document. It lists all the utility programs for the states that are part of the collaborative. We put that there so that you can know for your state what electric vehicle programs your utilities have. And I also put a link for that in the chat. back to you, Dory.
Thank you, Stacy. And sorry about that, guys. I was trying to pull up the link for the registration to put it in the chat and didn't do a good job while Stacy was talking. So slides should be back up. We're back on track. And I'm going to hand it over to Caitlin to give us a rundown of some federal funding. Caitlin, are you having a hard time coming off mute? All right, not sure what's going on. Okay, so Caitlin doesn't look like she's on the call yet. So maybe we can go ahead and just kind of skip through, and then when she comes back on, have her go over that. So I'm going to just skip us to the next conversation that she's not leading, and that is the conversation on who's applied for technical funding or who has applied for technical assistance. And John, I'm going to give you a couple minutes to share about the Charging Smart program. Oh, you're on mute, John.
Thank you, Dory. Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm John Bonnetz. I'm with North Carolina State University's Clean Energy Technology Center. And yes, the Charging Smart program is analogous to the Soul Smart program, which was intended to help basically reduce barriers to new solar deployments, rooftop solar. And Charging Smart is to help lower barriers to EV charger deployments. And we're getting little extra interest in the program now since there's so much uncertainty about federal funding. But this is a program of free technical assistance to any local government. And that is to provide assistance, help in identifying, maybe some friction points with codes enforcement, planning offices, authorities having jurisdiction, AHJ, and any of them who are interested in adopting EV-friendly policies. Our first cohort is wrapping up and we're recruiting for the next cohort. We're hoping to start it by October. So it's pretty important that if you're interested that we get talking quickly. We are recruiting additions to this next cohort. And now that, federal grants have largely dried up, we are appealing to local governments who wish to stand out and be more competitive to attract private investments in EV charging infrastructure. So I will put my email address and phone number in the chat if that's possible for me to do. And thank you so much for the time.
Absolutely. And it looks like we've got Caitlin on now. So I'm going to jump on back to the conversation about federal funding. So let me skip back a little bit. And there you go.
Thank you all for bearing with our technical difficulties over here at SSDN. It's good to see everybody. For those of you that I don't know, I'm Caitlin Rose. I'm the policy director at SSDN, managing our state policy program alongside colleagues in the federal funding program who know a lot more about this than I do. So I will say I'm a messenger today. So if you have specific questions about any of the details of the federal funding information I share, you are more than welcome to reach out to myself, and I will, if I don't know the answer to your question, I can get that answer from our federal funding staff. So bear with me as I make my way through this information. So just wanted to provide a little bit of background. I know probably all of you have been following this federal funding situation since the beginning of this new administration back at the top of the year. SSDN and SACE have been providing those updates kind of on an ongoing basis, but we wanted to really make sure you had a holistic view of how we got to where we are today. So we'll share a little overview of the federal funding pause, and legislation that was passed this summer that impacts the availability of federal funding related to transportation electrification as well as electric vehicle tax credits. We'll talk specifically about EV-related funding, including the NEVI program, and then provide a little bit of information about sort of things to consider, what to expect going forward. I will wrap up with some good news because I know that's a little bit rare in the federal funding landscape these days by sharing a little more specifics about grants related to transportation that are proceeding currently. So if you're thinking about transportation projects, trying to figure out how to fund those in your local communities, there are potentially some funding opportunities that might still be available for your use. Dory, you can head to the next slide. So just an overview of actions related to climate, energy, and transportation that have happened since January of this year. One of the first executive orders that was signed by the Trump administration was titled Unleashing American Energy, which had the effective result of essentially pausing many bill and IRA funding programs, including things like the Charging Fueling Infrastructure Program, NEVI program, and other things that I know are top priorities for you all as local governments. That was pretty quickly followed by an Office of Management and Budget memo that provided a little bit of specificity related to that executive order and resulted sort of in a review of existing grant programs to better align them with administration priorities and current policy. So that caused a ton of chaos for many of you for the first several months of this year. I know we were in conversation with folks about things like EECBG funding, CFI funding, other big grant programs that y'all have been working on. In early summer, the legislature passed a reconciliation package that essentially revoked the authorization of many of these bill and IRA funds and rescinded funds for several grant programs. That bill also included the revocation of many clean energy and electric vehicle tax credits. So the EV tax credits that were really exciting to see available are expiring at the end of September. So just a couple more, I guess, less than 2 weeks left of those tax credits being in existence, which is a major, I know, hurdle for those of you working on the procurement side of things and local governments to sort of price out what the cost of an electric vehicle is going to look like over the next couple of years. I will say there has been a lot of litigation related to all of the things that I have just mentioned, particularly related to the pausing and freezing of funding from the federal level. That litigation has provided temporary reinstatements of funding in some cases, but for the most part, that is still ongoing. So it's a pretty slow process that's still unfolding as we speak. And a lot of that has resulted in awardees being directed to bring their claims to federal claims court, which deals directly with contractual disputes. So just sort of something to be aware of about the ongoing litigation. And we've got a link in here if you're interested in diving in deeper about the overarching review of all the programs that have been impacted by these policies that I've just mentioned. Next slide, Dory. So specifically related to transportation in that funding pause in January and February, the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure or CFI program was heavily impacted. Most awardees have yet to be able to finalize their awards with the federal government, and there's a lot of uncertainty around if that will be able to happen in many cases. So I just provided a couple examples from the Southeast specifically. These are a couple in North Carolina related to NCDOT's CFI project, as well as the City of Raleigh's CFI project. So TBD on those in a lot of ways. There are several other projects around the region. I will mention 3 of these that are tentatively proceeding based on information we've heard from those governments, as well as information on usaspending.gov. So Henrico County, Virginia, the Atlanta Regional Commission, and the City of Nashville are sort of tentatively proceeding. Nashville's is proceeding specifically due to a litigation effort. Next slide. And we'll turn now to NEVI. It's like sort of focusing on the good news or things that are somewhat positive these days. I think updated NEVI state guidance was definitely a surprise, but a welcome one. Updated guidance was released a few weeks ago that changes some key components about the NEVI program as was originally written, um, which does include changes to what constitutes the build out of alt fuel corridors. But this should allow states to restart their NEVI programs. Those had been sort of in limbo since the beginning of the year, with really little to no certainty about whether or not that program would continue in any modified form going forward. So this is definitely welcome news. This new guidance in the reinstated program does give states greater discretion to designate corridors and again, figure out what constitutes the build out of an alternative fuel corridor. So previously, the focus of NEVI was on the Federal Highways Administration's designated alt fuel corridors. So this guidance does provide some flexibility to states. The deadline for states to resubmit their NEVI plans was September 12th. And we have heard from pretty much all southeastern states. Most, if not all of them, have resubmitted their state NEVI plans to the federal government, which is really good news. So hopefully we'll be seeing some more information come out about the NEVI program and as states are receiving feedback or approvals on their state plans from the feds in the coming weeks and months. Yeah, thanks, Dan. Florida did not resubmit, but we've heard confirmation from Virginia. I know North Carolina resubmitted. I'm pretty sure South Carolina did. So we're monitoring that situation across the region. If for some reason your state did not submit, we can do, or if you have questions about whether or not your state resubmitted for NEVI, just let us know and we can do some additional digging. Next slide. So to the good news piece, I wanted to focus in on things that are actually moving forward and available for you all as potential grant applicants. So there are several of these listed for existing awards related to transportation. The DOT Reconnecting Communities program for existing awardees is proceeding. So if you received a Reconnecting Communities award, you should be able to move forward with that. Finalized awards, again, I mentioned sort of some uncertainty related to CFI in that most awardees had not been able to finalize their awards with the federal government. But for those few that were able to execute final awards, that is tentatively proceeding. And some related to Clean School Bus, Clean Ports, and the Clean Heavy Duty program at EPA for existing awardees sort of proceeding more tentatively. And then we've got some recurring programs that have intersectionality with transportation electrification and electric vehicles. One of those that I want to make sure to mention is the DOT Build program. You might be more familiar with this program as DOT RAISE or Rebuilding American Infrastructure for Sustainability and Equity. The federal government changed the name of that program and somewhat altered its scope, but it is mostly intact in spirit. And there's lots of, or that program is available for utilization by local governments and other applicants. I wanted to also mention DOT Safe Streets for All. So if you're doing any work that intersects with traffic fatalities or safe streets work, that's another good program that's available. And then the FTA Low No Emissions program is also available for applications. Next slide. So just to close out with some things to consider, the landscape has changed pretty rapidly in the past 7-8 months. I know everyone is adjusting to new guidance and new information almost on a weekly basis. So it's good news that some of these grants are proceeding, and we're really glad to see some of that funding sort of back in motion or available to applicants to utilize, particularly for those awards that have already been issued or finalized. We're glad to see that moving again. But just wanted to make you all aware of changing restrictions, eligibilities, and priorities related to those grants that are moving forward, which, again, the DOT Build grant, which was formerly RAISE, I mentioned that some of the guidance related to that program has changed. So in the NOFO that is linked in this slide, DOT removed references to biking projects as being eligible for this program. So if you were planning on doing anything related to the RAISE program that's related to bicycle infrastructure and bike projects, that's no longer eligible. We've also, I'm passing this along from our federal funding director, Michael Dexter. He's been doing some more research into this program and has heard anecdotally that DOT is suggesting awardees remove EV charging from their existing awards. It's unconfirmed whether this is a broad request from from DOT as a whole for all RAISE projects, or if this is limited to a single project officer giving that guidance. But just something to be aware of. And if you have an existing DOT build award or you're considering applying, that's just something I would say to be aware of. And if you have questions, definitely reach out to SSDN and SACE, and we can try to help provide assistance where we can. Also wanted to point to the FTA low no emissions, which I know is a program that a lot of you have utilized in the past. We are anticipating award announcements for that program later this month. I will say some changing guidance related to that is encouraging the prioritization of CNG projects over battery electric. So obviously that's not really a one-to-one comparison in a lot of cases, and probably vastly changes the project scope if that's a shift that you might consider making. But just wanted to make y'all aware of that priority from the federal level. So prior applicants to low-no are being allowed to switch their applications from battery electric to CNG vehicles. But again, that might, is not necessarily the priority that you all might have locally. And finally, just wanted to flag some emerging guidance and requirements related to a DOT order that changes sort of the prioritization criteria that DOT utilizes when they consider project applications for these grant programs that they administer. And I've included some examples of the things that they're sort of adding to their list of scoring criteria. Many, pretty much all of which are not directly related to transportation, but are definitely tied to other administration priorities. So just something to be aware of as you're thinking about thinking about this from y'all's perspective in terms of an application to a federal program. I think that's all I've got. So I'll pause there, see if there are any questions, or Stan, Dory, or Nick, if you all have any additional context or thoughts that you want to add to the information that I shared.
Thank you, Caitlin. No, I don't. Great job, but yeah, open to any questions.
And while I'm waiting to see if you all have questions, I'm going to drop my email as well as my colleague Michael Dexter's email into the chat. If you think of something after the end of this meeting, and you want to get in touch with us, you are more than welcome to at any point. Okay, well, hearing none, Dory, I know we're going to move into our next portion, but want to turn it over to you in case you have anything else you want to add.
I don't. So we can go right on to this next section. John's already spoken. I don't know if you caught that. So yeah.
I hopped in right as he started. So thanks for shifting the agenda around for us. Much appreciated. Okay, so we did want to kind of open it up, obviously recognizing that, as I said, the landscape is vastly different than it was this time last year. Things that we were prioritizing and talking about collectively have really shifted a lot. So wanted to do a little check-in with you all to see, kind of given this landscape of where we're at, who has applied for funding or who is in need of technical assistance. And if, any example is a good example right now. If you've got, if you're thinking about applying for federal funding and need to be connected with technical assistance, or if you have already applied, if you have lessons learned that you want to share. And just to elevate John's comment from the chat about Charging Smart cohort, they're intending to pull together the next cohort in the next 2 weeks. So if you're interested, that's sort of a time-sensitive ask. You can reach out to John. I'll give you a couple more seconds to think about it. Hey, John, I see you're on camera and off mute. Do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I don't want to take anybody else's time, but I did want to point out that I did hear back from one prospect. She's on this call, and the planning department there said, why would we need technical assistance? We already allow EV chargers by right in all districts, in all areas. And so my response to that was to point out that, again, to emphasize that as things are shifting away from federal funding and towards private sector investments, I think it behooves local governments to distinguish themselves with such a designation program as this. And at the end of the program, you get either a bronze, silver, or gold designation as to your community's readiness for these infrastructure investments. So, yeah, thanks for letting me share.
Yeah, thanks, John. That's helpful context. And I think we've seen a lot of success amongst our membership with the Soul Smart program. And that type of sort of cohort model seems to be really effective. So I would encourage all of you to reach out to John if you've got additional questions.
All right, then I'm going to move us along to our conversation on EV charging fee structure. So Caitlin's going to lead us off with that as well. We, heard on the listserv some folks were asking questions, and we're trying to make sure that we're bringing these like top of line items for conversation. So kick it off to Caitlin and Kevin to lead us on this conversation.
Thanks, Dory. Yeah, I'm probably going to pass the mic pretty quickly, but wanted to invite Kevin Lindley from Chatham County, North Carolina, to come speak to you all today about some work he's been doing locally to figure out the best path forward for EV charging fee structures. Kevin, I'll pass it to you.
Okay. Yeah, so just real quick, I'm just going to show you guys a spreadsheet that I've made for coming up with how we're going to charge for our EV charging, EV charging at the stations we built. So if I do this, I don't know exactly how this works. Can you, oh, I see. You can see the whole thing now, right?
We can see it.
Okay. So the reason that I created this spreadsheet in the first place, from the very beginning, before we even built stations, my manager, and I think the board too, was interested in, they wanted to charge something for charging. They didn't want to feel like they were giving the electricity away for free. Because, the county is going to have to pay to put it in and to maintain it. So they wanted to at least recoup our electricity costs. That was sort of the goal. But the problem was I didn't know how much they were going to be used. And I didn't know really what rates we were going to be charged in the beginning. And so I had to make a lot of guesses. So this spreadsheet's evolved over the years. Our DC fast charge station went in 2022, I think. And then two of our level 2 stations went in late 22, and then one went in early 23. So we've had a few budget years to develop this. But basically what I did was put in the electricity cost at the top, and DC fast and level 2 are separate because they have vastly different power draws, and they use a completely different rate schedule through Duke. So once we started, I had to kind of guess what rate schedule they were going to be using, but now I know. So a lot of these little notes that I have here, it says updated as of 9/17/25. So I go through periodically. I recently updated all these just for this call, but several of these quantities that are listed here are going to be out of date pretty soon. And let's see, I just did something. I got rid of something. I think I deleted something. Hang on. There. So this, in the electricity cost section, this is basically a mirror image of our bill from Duke. So you've got the customer charge, which is a flat fee, billing demand for the DC fast charge, the usage charge, which, you know, this is a guess based on our usage throughout the year. And I have to make an estimate. I also use this for budgeting for the future year, because you can see over on the side here, I tally everything and look at the net revenue for all the stations. And then Duke's, every utility is probably a little different, but Duke has all these extra little costs and riders, the storm recovery, customer assistance. They have this thing, summary of rider adjustments, that is about 5 or 6 different riders that all have different per kilowatt hour or per kilowatt rates, and they're combined into one number. So you can look all this up on your utility's website. And that's what I did, because a lot of times they don't report on the bill. It doesn't always report the cost per kilowatt hour. It just gives you a number, so you don't always know. But it combines all these charges, gives you a total for the month, and then a yearly estimate. And then same thing for the level 2, except for level 2 doesn't have a demand charge, and so that's pretty important when it comes to trying to match up revenue and demand. But then at the bottom, this is the charge that we're charging currently. We're doing 40 cents per kilowatt hour for DC fast charge, and 25 cents per kilowatt hour for the level 2. So at the rate that I have in the estimate up above of 2,100 kilowatt hours, that would be $840 a month. ChargePoint is our provider, and they charge 10% of the revenue collected for collecting the revenue. I mean, that's their cut of the revenue that comes in. And then, so they remit to us 90% of that, and then I have a yearly estimate for the DC fast charge. And then here, a yearly estimate for the level 2. And just because we tend to run our level 2s at a deficit, because 90% of the power that we distribute is through the one DC fast charge station. So this is mainly due to, I think, market not wanting to charge a whole lot for this. And so the DC fast charge revenue supplements the level 2s. So then if you look over, this shows the cost per station, and then the total cost for our stations based on my estimate of how much we're going to use, and then the total revenue, and it ends up being a net revenue of $51. So it basically balances out. One thing so this is just meant to recover our electricity costs. You could modify the spreadsheet if you wanted to include some other things, like you may want to recoup your capital expenditure if you paid for this out of pocket. We use grants to pay for a lot of this, so we did pay for a decent portion of it, but quite a bit of the cost was paid for by grants, and I didn't get the direction from my board that they were interested in recovering that. They just took that as a cost of doing business. The other thing that's not included in here is any extra money that we're taking in for maintenance, and part of that, or networking fees. Part of that is because as a function of the grant, we were allowed to prepay for 5 years of maintenance and networking costs. So the grant paid for a portion of that. We paid for a portion of that when the stations were first put in. So we're not paying that currently. Any maintenance that comes up, we just call ChargePoint and they come out and fix it. Eventually, in a couple more years, that'll be something we have to think about. And I haven't really thought exactly what we're going to do. If the stations are still working, we'll probably continue to maintain them unless we can find a private company that's willing to take them over and maintain and operate them. But so that's it in a nutshell. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Kevin. This is a really helpful, comprehensive overview, and you kind of addressed Trey's question in the chat about looking whether or not you're planning to cover ongoing operations and maintenance or networking costs. Wanted to see if you had any additional comments about that before we open it up to larger questions.
Yeah, I think when we start having to pay it, I think we will try to recoup that in our rates. The other thing that I didn't mention it's sort of inherent in the way the billing works is that it's difficult to come up with if your rate, we bill based on the kilowatt hour dispensed. So the problem with that is that there are a lot of fixed costs in the bill. And so the more kilowatt hours you dispense, the cheaper it is per kilowatt hour. So that's why you have to make some assumptions about how much you're gonna dole out. Otherwise, you can see in the model, the per kilowatt hour rate is only 8 cents for the DC fast charge, but we charge 40 cents. And that's because every month the station at some point during the month runs at full capacity. So that's a 64.8 kilowatt demand charge, which ends up being an extra $400 every month to the bill. So that gets spread out. If we dispense 2,000 kilowatt hours, then it's spread over 2,000. But if we dispense 3,000, it's spread over 3,000. So the trend we're seeing now is that we're dispensing more and more energy every year on average. So if that continues, then hopefully we'll be able to keep the rates the same but take in more revenue relative to what we're paying for electricity. So that would be my hope. I don't want to keep raising rates, but that doesn't really answer the question. But it does bring up an interesting dilemma with all these charging systems, there's not really a good way to. Oh, the other thing we don't charge for dwell time, or some places charge for a session initiation fee. You could do that. I mean, you'd have to make estimates on how many times you think it would be used and that kind of thing, but that's not something we have built in right now.
Kevin, how did y'all come to the decision not to charge for dwell time? Was that just how did you guys get to that decision?
The main reason is that the utilization is pretty low still, even though so that's less than an hour. Well, around 2,000 kilowatt hours at the DC fast station is about an hour a day. So there's just not really a need for it. If it was, and all of our level 2 stations are at places where there's plenty of parking, and so it's not really, and they all have 2 ports. The level 2s have 2 ports, so we don't have very often where it's reported that people weren't able to charge because somebody was sitting there.
Are you able to track dwell time even if you're not charging for it with the level 2?
Yeah, you can. Well, you can. ChargePoint has a dashboard, and probably all charging stations have dashboard type things like that, and you can see the length of session, the session length for each charger or across the board. So you can track that. There's ways to get it. The data is there if you need it.
Yeah, and it looks like in the chat, Shailene from Winston-Salem mentioned that they're charging for that idle time just because there's lots of folks who sit way over the, I guess, 4-hour window that most charging. I live in Durham, and that's the dwell time window is about 4 hours.
Right, and it would make a lot of sense in a parking deck, for instance, or something like that, where people might be there for a long time.
Yeah. And speaking of parking decks, Hannah from Gwinnett County, Georgia, wanted to know if any of your charging stations are located in parking lots with general parking fees.
No, none of our, all of ours are in, let's see. Yeah, all of ours are in, they're all at county facilities,
Okay.
and they're all in parking lots that generally have plenty of parking for the facility.
Got it. John, I see your hand up. I'll pass it.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. This is fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing this work. Shailene's question makes me, or comment makes me wonder, is anyone in the group looking at level 1 charging where, the cost of the infrastructure is so low that excessive dwell times really wouldn't hurt?
I don't know if anybody's looking at it, but I was just at the airport recently, and I'm pretty sure they have either a level 1 or a very underpowered level 2, and that makes perfect sense. If you're gonna be parked there for a couple days, why you don't need a level 2? Just put a level 1, and it's free, and you just plug in. I don't know why they should install 30 of those things instead of just, they've only got a couple right now, but it makes a lot of sense in a place like that.
I had a couple more questions for you. Are any of the facilities? Hear me? Can y'all hear me?
A little better.
Okay. Are any of the facilities that you have charging at, are those open at night or do those have limited hours?
A condition of the grant was that they be accessible 24/7. So I'll tell you, we've got one is at a Smithfield chicken and barbecue restaurant, and right off of a main state highway in Siler City. So that's the DC fast charge. It gets the vast majority of our charging electricity is dispensed through that charger. But the other one is at a library, in a rural library. One is at our agriculture and convention center. It's probably the most used after the DC fast charge. And then one is at a county office building.
And how do your rates compare to other charging rates, like private or company owned in the area?
The DC fast charge is pretty close. I think I've seen anywhere from 30 to 60 cents, 40 to 60 cents a kilowatt hour for DC fast in this area. And I think our level 2s are probably on the low side now. We changed rates a year and a half ago, and I didn't recommend a rate increase this year. So it's probably been, other level 2s maybe a little higher than that now. But some are free, so
Any other questions from the group? Well, hearing none, Kevin, is there any high level lessons learned or advice for other folks that you haven't already shared that you'd like to impart before we shift to our next agenda item?
I think if you're going to do something like this, just you do need to be aware of that balance between the more it's used, the lower the cost per kilowatt hour. So if you're going to charge, maybe just kind of do a market survey, go around and check and see. I think there's places like PlugShare, you can go check stations in the area, and it usually gives as much information as it knows about the charging rates. So that'd probably be a good place to start, and then just try to track it. Duke in our area has been changing the rates over the last few years, it seems like they've been a little more volatile than normal, and they've added some extra riders that really change my projections. So you just need to keep up with the bill and make sure that when you're going to formulate your budget for the next year, that you are capturing all the new charges and riders that are added.
Well, thank you, Kevin. This is really, really helpful. And yeah, I mean, are you open to sharing contact information if folks have additional questions or want to follow up with you about this
Oh,
research?
sure.
Great.
Yeah, and I've shared the spreadsheet with other people, so that's not a problem either.
Awesome. Well, great. Yeah, Kevin, thanks so much for this presentation. And yeah, if y'all have questions and want to get in touch, we can share Kevin's contact info, or if you'd like a copy of the spreadsheet, Kevin very kindly has offered that as well. So appreciate you coming and speaking about that. Dory, I'll pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin, for sharing your expertise. So I will invite Stan Cross, my colleague, to come on at this point and guide us in a conversation around EV infrastructure assessment and financing.
Thanks, Dory. Good morning, everybody. Hope folks are doing good. So I am in some ways a stand-in for the city of Raleigh, which is very intimidating. But but their team couldn't be here together because they've got it today because they've got an event happening locally. But we wanted to talk about some of what the city of Raleigh's been doing around assessing EV infrastructure and looking at different financing models. And so my hope for this part of the presentation is that we can engage in a conversation together about what you all are doing in and around assessing your EV infrastructure needs and figuring out how to finance those needs. I think building off of sort of what we just heard from Kevin. And so I want to start with sort of the challenge of EV infrastructure assessment. And one of the things that the city of Raleigh has experienced is that sometimes the sort of what you need from EV charging is sometimes counterintuitive. And I think this goes to John, your comment about level one charging and where that may be appropriate versus level two versus and different sort of power levels of level two and then DC fast chargers and how you're pairing the charging infrastructure with your fleet needs in particular. So if we kind of shift towards thinking about that internal EV charging infrastructure need, how that process is unfolding. And one of the things that the city of Raleigh's done is they've created some software algorithms that allow them to kind of test different strategies in terms of like, do we have an EV charger for each EV we have in our fleet? If so, what would the right EV charger be in that case? Or do we have a few EV chargers that are being used by multiple vehicles? And if so, what should the EV charger be in that case? And I think this is a really interesting way to start to kind of unpack the opportunity. Because what we've seen in the last sort of, 5 years now is that, the range of EVs has increased significantly. So what they can do now in a fleet application is very different than what they could have done prior. And we're also seeing a lot more variation in EV charging infrastructure. We have some really innovative level one smart charging. We have different power level two charging. And of course, we have various power DC fast charging as well. And so I'm curious, for folks on the call, for those of you who have gone through a process of trying to figure out how to right size your EV infrastructure to meet your current electric fleet demand and prepare for future demand. If folks could share some of what you've gone through in that assessment process, and kind of what you've learned from trying to get it right, and really maximize the efficiency and cost effectiveness of infrastructure for powering your fleet. So I just invite folks to sort of share in that peer-to-peer spirit of the collaborative, kind of what some of your experiences have been around assessing infrastructure to meet your fleet needs.
So I presented on this at the Clean Fleet. We have had multiple fellows come in and worked with the university. We started with an analysis of which fleet we're getting and where they're going to go. We mapped it out. Looking at the electrical needs over there, and then we tracked the data from the vehicles themselves that are being replaced onto how many miles they go and where they're located. So how often they would need to be charged.
Nice. And how did that work for you all? Did that sort of change the outcome of what you expected for your EV charging infrastructure setup?
Well, I mean, it is a educational opportunity where we have to adjust the mindsets of those departments getting the vehicles, that they will not be getting one charger per vehicle. Instead, they will be getting the number of charges needed in that area that supports the right number of vehicles that plan to get over there.
Nice. Well, thanks for sharing. Anybody else wanna share some of what you've gone through in trying to right size that infrastructure? Rick, I see that you may be on the call. Is that a fact? Rick Longabart, are you here?
I am, Stan, and thanks so much for calling me out. I do appreciate that. I wish I was there to present. Unfortunately, I do have a multiple conflicts, so I'm multitasking and listening in, but I appreciate the opportunity to shout out. and I will share a little bit more to your thought, right? And
That'd be great. Yeah,
this
please.
this is just a glimpse of 164 pages of our EV implementation strategy rollout, so it doesn't really do it justice. But one of the things that we did do during this process is we did use telemetry to look at where the vehicles are traveling from and to. In addition to that, naturally, the dwell cycles and the amount of miles that are traveling over the course of a period of time to determine how many chargers that we needed. The one-to-one ratio that you have, obviously, on the top of the screen, it's truthfully to be told, is not affordable, not feasible, and doesn't make sense, right? Because you're not going to have a charger at every parking stall where there's a vehicle. And because of the fact that our fleet is over close to 5,000 vehicles, it's not possible to put a charger at every single parking spot. And two, a lot of the vehicles don't domicile in a building. They're taken home, going out, doing inspections. After the job is done, they go back home again. So they never even hit a domicile to begin with. And those are the low-hanging fruit. So what we decided to do was kind of make it more of a 4-to-1 ratio rather than a 1-to-1 ratio, because it just wasn't feasibly affordable. And not only that, most of the buildings didn't support the infrastructure for the low demand for transformers anyway, so we couldn't even put in a charger for every parking spot. So we're more of a 4-to-1 ratio, as you see on the bottom part of the screen, optimized the B2P philosophy. And then we also decided to really look at how to transition this. As though, while we have 80 vehicles that are electrified right now and over 435 that are hybrids, we also recognize the fact that we need to change the behavior of our stakeholders as to how they charge their vehicles. And so one of the philosophies is that they need to treat it like a equivalency of gallons per gasoline. And what I mean by that is they need to be able to manage their own state of charge, and they can't expect to plug in each and every time, regardless if the vehicle is 3/4 to fully charged, because it doesn't make any sense. As we all know, in the charging infrastructure world, it costs more money and more demand charges to charge it from 75% to 100% than it does from 0 to 75. And so your sweet spot is anywhere between 25% discharge to 75%. If you try to charge it to 75 to 100, you're wasting a lot of time and a lot of energy. We all know that, right? Don't need to really ponder on that. So our philosophy is kind of change the behavior of how an operator manages a vehicle state of charge. And so we're building DC charging locations at every one of our fuel hubs. So we have 7 fuel sites throughout the city. So the concept is that you're not going to get a charger at every single parking spot, nor do you really need one. If we build out enough DC fast chargers that are fuel hub, you can go to that fuel hub and you can get renewable propane, you can get renewable diesel, you can get compressed natural gas, you can get B20, you can get E85, you can also get EV charging, and then you can get your traditional gasoline, and hopefully it's not too distant future. You'll be able to get able to get renewable gasoline, right? So it's more of a fuel hub. So if we have enough DC chargers, why build one in every building where there's not enough demand or energy use anyway? Get the operators to better understand when they get to a discharge level, go to a DC fast charger, charge up 5 or 10 minutes, and kind of leapfrog charging. And then, the rest of the time, if you need to take that vehicle home, you have an L1 charger and you have trickle chargers. And so while we're building about hopefully 500 chargers, 50 DC fast chargers throughout the city in the course of the next 10 years, it's not necessarily a 1-to-1 ratio. And I'm rambling now, so
No, that's great. No, this is super helpful, Rick. I'm really appreciated you were able to multitask us into your morning. So really, really great insights. And when you're explaining that philosophy, what was kind of being triggered for me was that you really are modeling personal EV ownership, right? Like, how I charge my EV in my usual life, right, is that I am, plugging in at home when I get down below that 30% state of charge, and I'm only charging up to, at most 80%. And when I need a charge and I'm out on the road and then I'm hitting a DC fast charger and like getting that fast charge. So I think it's really interesting to kind of see how, in some ways, the way in which you're trying to educate vehicle operators to think about charging an EV is very much in line with how you would charge your own EV as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that support, and we did one thing better that might be interested to the group, because we're all struggling, especially with the lack of grant funding and CFI programs that are dissolving, and even the $7,500 fee that you can write off the vehicle. Is that, how do you pay for infrastructure, right? Does it come out of general fund? Does it come out of enterprise dollars? Does it come from grant dollars? Where does this money come from? Because that 500 chargers and 50 DC fast chargers is a ton of money. And so who pays for that, right? And so our philosophy, which we just deploy, is more of a capital investment fee to our stakeholders within the city of Raleigh. And the way that works is that every department that has a vehicle, we are charging a 0.75 fee as a capital investment fee each year. And that is based on the acquisition cost of the vehicle. So those charges at 0.75 at acquisition cost, they are paying into a capital investment fee starting in fiscal year 26-27. And so this is new revelation things that we just adopted, because every time we ask for money, we oftentimes compete for capital improvement dollars throughout the city. And so therefore that money comes directly from the stakeholders, and they're actually paying the money for the building out the infrastructure through the vehicle acquisition. So therefore now we've got seed money to build out infrastructure, and two, if we ever get back to a grant philosophy, we can use that as seed money for our match dollars for a grant application.
Rick, this is John Bonnets. Was that 0.75? Is that cents per mile?
No, that is actually 0.75% of the acquisition cost of the vehicle. So if you look at 5,000 vehicles and we pared it down to a vehicle that only costs more than $5,000 or more, every department that had a vehicle, we would charge 0.75 based on the acquisition cost of the vehicle. And we did that 7.5, not just a whimsical, hey, let's just make it less than 1%. We took out what we thought we needed to build out infrastructure over the course of the next 5 years. And we said, what do we need to generate in revenue in order to build out those charging infrastructures that we need for the next 5 years? And it probably needs to be more, truthfully. But we needed a digestible percentage that department didn't say, oh my gosh, that's a big number you're asking, and therefore obviously it wouldn't have been adopted. So 0.75 was the sweet spot to say that would be enough money to generate some of our other capital improvements, as well as the infrastructure that we're planning on building out over the course of the next 5 years. Hope that helps, John.
Great. Anybody have any other questions about this sort of EV assessment, infrastructure assessment conversation? Anybody have anything they want to share?
And I think I've sent it just about to everybody on this call, Stan, but if anybody ever wants to document, it's great great bedtime bathroom reading.
It is. It is. And I put the link in the chat as well. And yeah, what we were doing today was just kind of pulling out these two pieces from the study because these are two questions that we've heard the collaborative, asking a lot about. What are creative ways to assess our infrastructure needs? And then if we want to go to the next slide, Dory, or whoever's running this, yeah, I guess Dory, also looking at kind of different financing models. And I think this gets at what we've been talking about all along so far is that, notion that we've got, a change in federal funding availability. Obviously, that's been a priority for all of us for the last few years. Before that, we had VW settlement money. There's been sort of this pretty much decade-long process where, we've really been chasing grant dollars to support EV infrastructure deployment. And I think that that there is like a healthy side to this coin in terms of the market, which is that as these federal grants and other federal supported means of financing EV infrastructure are drying up or have dried up. I think we are at a point where the market has reached maturity enough so that models for ways to go about getting infrastructure that engages the private sector are becoming more and more available. And I appreciated, Rick, how in um, your all study, you kind of broke out some of the different ways in which the private sector can be engaged to, support EV infrastructure financing. And for those on the call, in the report and with the link that I dropped in the chat, if you go to page kind of 138, 139 in that report, you'll kind of see more of a description of what these different financing opportunities are. But they're all really interesting, right? Because you've got public-private partnerships that are possible to strike, and you've got a lot of interest in the EV industry to build relationships with local governments. And I think that interest is only going to increase. We are likely to see a lot more competition in the private sector. We're likely to see some consolidation in the private sector as things shift from a grant funded to a more traditional business model approach to providing this hardware and these services. And under those public-private partnerships, the build, operate, transfer model is one where sort of the private partner is responsible for the design, construction, and operation of the charging infrastructure and transfers the ownership to the government, to the local government after a specified period of time. So that's kind of this model where in the near term, you got somebody else taking care of it for you. In the long term, you take it over. The design, build, finance, operate, maintain model is similar, but the private partner takes responsibility for everything and operates it for a special period of time before transferring it back to the government. So with the first one, the transfer is kind of right after the construction is done, and on the next one, it's sort of a longer term piece where the private sector is taking responsibility and local government doesn't have to worry about it. In the concession model, local government is granting a private partner the right to build and operate charging infrastructure within a specified area for a specified period of time, in exchange for payment or revenue share. And in North Carolina, local governments can go into sort of a concession model arrangement for up to a decade without having to get special requests from the legislature. So that's a model that back when I was running infrastructure company Brightfield, with many of you on the call in North Carolina, we used this model to get early DC fast chargers on city property. And then the joint venture model, involves the formation of a joint venture, right, where both partners are collaborating to develop and operate charging infrastructure. So there's a lot of sort of opportunity within that public-private partnership space to think about, different models that you might pursue and different partnerships you might want to strike with certain EV infrastructure companies. Anybody have any thoughts or questions on the public-private partnership models? Anybody leveraged public-private partnerships to get infrastructure on the ground in your city?
John, we are looking at a pilot for a SaaS model. I won't name companies because nothing has been official yet, but that's certainly something on our radar, and we think it's a great way of starting out a combination behind the fence public facing. Our only reservation is obviously a couple of things. Is one, food for thought, is throughput, because their revenue stream, if they own and build the infrastructure, is they want to recover those costs. And so we need to ensure that we have enough throughput, that there's energy being used at those chargers to recover their energy revenue stream.
Right.
And what happens if that forecast doesn't happen, right? Then who pays the delta if we're not having enough throughput? And then there's also the legal aspect of it that we haven't yet broached on from our legal perspective, is that now you've got someone else's equipment on city property, and then the what ifs. What if the vehicle catches on fire? What if the infrastructure burns down? What if someone gets injured and on their piece of equipment? There's always those what ifs, and I think that's when the red pens come out, right?
Yep. No, totally. The what ifs are real, for sure. For sure. Anybody else engaged in public-private partnerships at this point, or have any interest in exploring that? All right. Well, then let's move on. So, the other sort of opportunity that's highlighted in the Raleigh study is Sourcewell, which many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with. But, working with Sourcewell and their purchasing contracts to access EV charging equipment, which can include sort of loan and lease programs. So that's another opportunity. There's a lot of interesting things happening through Sourcewell to try to access EV charging. Has anybody used Sourcewell to provide EV infrastructure for your local government?
That is a great source, and I will say it's not the only source, right? So Sourcewell is a co-op, a federally mutual process, but I mean there is the North Carolina Sheriff's Association, there's HCAC, I mean there's GSA, I mean there's a plethora of different mechanisms and that's one example of a way of purchasing infrastructure without having to go out to bid and getting the product that you're looking for. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And then the other, opportunity, and again, I'm is charging infrastructure as a service. And this is certainly a growing segment of the EV charging infrastructure, industry. Really looking at this particular model as one that is proven to have some viability, and I think we're likely to see grow, especially in variety of use cases for fleet applications, including things like electric school buses and other applications. I'm curious if anybody has engaged in charging infrastructure as a service, where, a company is basically providing the chargers, installation and maintenance, and you as the fleet or local government is sort of operating it as you need to meet your charging needs. Has anybody used charging infrastructure as a service? Looks like the city, okay, I'm going to the chat. So it looks like the city of Greensboro put in that they use Sourcewell. So going back to the Sourcewell question, thanks for sharing, Shri. Is there anything you want to say about that? Has that been a successful process so far for you all?
Good morning. Yes, so it's been our EECBG funds. We have a lot of activities through that funding. And so I think it's current. So it's a 1-year pilot program where we're running telematic devices on 100 city-owned, city vehicles from across different departments in the city. So we were looking for consistent data, mileage, including mileage, idling times, and things that we just wanted some consistency. So with us approaching 3 months, we're really excited about the data and the cost savings that it's showing. And we're hoping that, by 6 months, like every marker we'll have just enough information to really take to our city council so that this can really aid in decision making for, transitioning our fleet. So this is really a great starting point for us to really encourage some EV cars, some more hybrids and things like that. So we're really excited, and the Sourcewell purchasing contract was really easy. So I look forward to doing that. Hopefully, being able to do that again soon.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that, Shri, and congratulations. That sounds like a really great pilot study. Look forward to seeing where it's at the 6 month mark and going forward. I think that's a real great. I think, similar, with what Rick and team are doing in Raleigh, I think it's another way to get just that really strong data that builds a more compelling and argument and one that you can feel more confident about. So that's really exciting.
Thank
How
you.
about just getting back to charging infrastructure as a service? Has anybody used that approach? I hypothesize that asking that question a year from now is going to have maybe some more yeses on the call. Is there anything you wanted to say, Rick, about that model? Have you all looked at charging infrastructure as a service and considered it for Raleigh?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a little bit of unknowns, and I still think I hate to use the phrase "Wild Wild West."
Yeah, yeah,
It's still to be considered, but certainly that is definitely on our radar.
that's great. That's great.
And
Well,
some of these
yeah.
SaaSes are actually on Sourcewell and other contracts as well. So don't think that you have to go out to bid provided to render some of those services.
Right, absolutely. So yeah, I just want to emphasize, in closing that I think it's really I think this next era of electric transportation expansion is going to require us to be thinking more broadly about how we pay for the infrastructure that's needed to power these vehicles. I think we've heard of a lot of different ways in which dollars are being brought in to local governments in order to support infrastructure build out, operation, and maintenance. And I think there's a lot of options and ways to do it. And I think the more creative we can all be, and the more we can continue to share our successes, I think the better poised will be, and the market will be to kind of push into this new era of vehicles and infrastructure being something you buy and operate, just like the gas cars and the gas you buy, and no longer sort of relying on federal funding to the degree that we have been to support that. So, Dory, let me turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Stan. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, everybody, for weighing in and sharing your experiences with charging infrastructure. So just wanted to highlight a few resources for you guys. Make sure that you're aware that we've been updating them, and make sure that you have access to them. So one is the Electrify the South Electric Transportation Toolkit for local governments. And this resource I think this is the 7th iteration of the toolkit. This year, as always, we try to make sure that we are like putting forward examples, real life examples of solutions and actions and policies that are both equitable and cost effective for local governments to be able to implement. So we have, lots and lots of links in the toolkit to what y'all are doing. So if you notice that you're in the toolkit and we have or we've not highlighted you in the toolkit, we update every year. I'm happy to make updates along the way as well to really share exciting and innovative ideas. And also, if we've missed something or have misstated something, make sure you let me know so that we can fix that. But this year, the way that we've structured the toolkit is almost in a series of fact sheets to try to make it easier to just get to the resource that's you're most interested in. So we have, these different sections. Say you're really wanting to know more about permitting and what other local governments are doing around permitting, you can just click right to it. And, we've got all those different topic areas listed. There also is a comprehensive planning section if you're interested in trying to do the whole kit and caboodle, but realizing and recognizing that most local governments don't have capacity to take something on. We wanted to make sure that it was structured in a way that you could utilize and take bits and pieces of as you need. So the link there is on the ETS website. Obviously, I'll send around the slides as soon as we are done with today's call so that you can click on those and have access to them. But any questions about the toolkit or how to access the toolkit?
Hey, Dory, if you don't mind me adding, I'm sorry, I should have brought this up when Stan was presenting.
Sure.
If anybody's interested, or I can send it to you and you can post it on the site, we did build out a toolkit that determines the amount of chargers based on the type of vehicles and the type of chargers based on the type of vehicles and the cost for building out that infrastructure, because we don't know what the crystal ball looks like in 5 or 10 years from now. So the system takes, you put in the vehicle, you put in the type of vehicle, you put in the miles it travels per day, per week, per month, and then it does the analytics and determines the cost and number of chargers that you need. It's an Excel worksheet. Happy to send it to everybody and anybody that wants it. And then the 164-page document, or however long it is there is a PowerPoint version of that as well that condenses it down to about 12 slides. Happy to share that as well. Sorry, didn't mean to intrude.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you, Rick, for offering up those resources. I'm sure that folks are going to be interested in that. So, yes, thank you for that. Let's see, give me just a second. All right. So the next, any questions though about the toolkit? Give folks a second to go back to that. All right, not seeing any or hearing any. So moving on to the transportation electrification and the Southeast report. So this is the 6th annual report that SACE and Atlas Public Policy put out in conjunction every year. So it's a longitudinal look at market data. It has 6 indicators that we look at: manufacturing, electric vehicle sales, charging infrastructure, and then also investor-owned utility and public funding. So that has just been released this past week. It's current through Q2 data of 2025, and it also has the link there gives access to the report itself, a blog that Stan has written about it, and then each of the state pages. So if you want to specifically look through information specific to your state, you can find all of those state pages there as well. Any questions about the TE report? Or Stan, do you want to give some like high level points about the report this year?
Yeah, no, I think I want everyone to go look at it, so I'm not going to tell you too much because then you're not going to go look at it. But I will say that what's continues to be evident in the data is that the consumer market is growing and it continues to grow. And so, despite the headlines, as of now, we're seeing a lot of uptake of electric vehicles by consumers. We're seeing significant growth in EV infrastructure, in the public facing infrastructure deployment, which is really good to see. That kind of goes to what I was saying earlier about the market kind of finally reaching a maturity point where we're seeing scaling of infrastructure, but we're also seeing upticks in reliability of that infrastructure, which has been an issue that I think is finally getting addressed. And then the other thing that I'll say is that we're seeing a lot of really interesting tensions starting to emerge in our region because we still lead the country in EV and battery and supply chain manufacturing investment and jobs. And we're starting to see some companies kind of pulling back from their committed investments as the sort of shift in federal policy kind of takes hold. And we're going to be watching really closely to see whether that settles out and it's more of just a normal course of business or whether there's going to be deeper impacts from what's happening federally on kind of the economic development opportunities in the region. So I think that's going to create some tension and some opportunity to be engaging with policymakers in the coming year to really think about the downside for the region if this market, doesn't remain strong, given all of the economic development opportunities that are at hand. So check out the report, lots of good data, and we designed the state pages just to be a kind of one pager front and back that can be used to also highlight what's going on at that state level. So as you all are trying to educate internally and persuade internally, that can help you contextualize, the opportunity in your community for making investments. So hope you enjoy the report. Any questions you have about it or anything that you want to talk more about it, don't hesitate to reach out.
Great. Thank you, Stan. All right. And then just wanted to remind everybody again, our next virtual meeting is going to be November the 13th from 10 to 11:30. And so we'll send out a registration link for that. And then also a reminder that we've got the upcoming event in Athens, Georgia on October 14th. So if you're Georgia or Tennessee and interested in participating in that, please make sure to register for that. We have about 5 minutes, so I would love to just kind of open it up if anybody has any questions or comments or wants to ask anything of your peers while we've got, while we're all together on the call and we've got the time. So I will just kind of leave it open here and just really thank everybody for making the time. I know that it's crazy times, everybody's super busy, so really do appreciate everybody being able to join in today. We'll get the resources sent around afterwards. Caitlin or Nick, anybody, any lasting or any thoughts, parting thoughts?
Nothing major for me, just really thank you all for your participation today. And for those of you located in Georgia or Tennessee, we're very, very excited to see you in 3D in real life in Athens in a couple of weeks.
Great. Thank you, Caitlin. So I will just kind of we'll leave the call going for the next 5 minutes. If anybody wants to come off mute or ask a question of one another, thoughts, just kind of let it keep going. And then we'll sign off at the 11:30 mark.
Dorian, I need to sign off, but I didn't want to do that without recognizing the effort that everyone has put forth for this call. It definitely is a wealth of information, and I appreciate the information. Thank you so much for putting this together. Great job.
Thank you. Always appreciate your expertise and insights. And thanks
You
again,
guys.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of your wealth of knowledge today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, if anybody is interested, they can I put my email in the chat. They can send me an email or we can talk about the spreadsheet or how you would set up some of the things that aren't in my spreadsheet if you want to talk through that. But I'd be happy to share it with anybody.
Super appreciate it. Good to see you.
See you guys.
All right, looks like it's just us facilitators. So I guess we could go ahead and sign off. Thank you guys.
All right.
Thanks,
Great.
Rachel.
Thanks,
Webinar.
Dory. Thanks, everybody.